Hello, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for another topic of the week. So, first things first, last week's topic on the subject of special characters. Lots of favorites there. There was some alignment. There was some that really hit with people. Vlad, one of the choices I made, was very popular. I don't know if maybe I put my thumb on the scale there, or just I think he is just a really popular character. He had a great story, even though he never had really a cool mini. I don't know. Maybe there's some people who are fans of it, but I always thought his mini was not great. But anyway, lots of good feedback on what made people enjoy special characters. And it should be noted that there was another common answer I didn't point out originally, but that certainly came up enough. And that was none of the above. And by that I mean there are people who just don't like special characters at all, who enjoy the idea of creating their own, and they don't like them or their presence in the game. So that's a perfectly valid answer too, and I think the game's big enough to allow for that. Special characters, I don't think, are required for any particular forces. You could argue maybe a little bit of death in Age of Sigmar, but even then, probably not. There's plenty of competitive forces that don't run like Big Papa Nagash or Archon or somebody like that. But at any rate, to continue, I kind of hope we do see more of them. They tend to get attention in sculpts. I like them the most when they're like alternate versions of an existing thing. That is to say, like when you can build a thing as the generic lord, so like there's a generic version of this thing, but then there's also a named character version of the thing. I like those the best, I think, in the end, because then you can kind of choose your own setting. If you really like that special character, then you can build him as that special character. If you don't care, you don't want them, you still have access to the generic guy, same guy, and you can build your own version, your own story. And I think that's a win. So I like those when it's set that way. The recent Great Unclean one's a really good example of that, right? Where you had sort of the generic Great Unclean one in a couple different configurations, but you could also build him as Rodigus, as a particular named Great Unclean one. Fingers crossed, I'm hoping that whenever we get our new Keeper of Secrets, it's the same way and we bring back Inkari. Just a hope. I don't know if it'll happen, but there we go. I'd love to see it. So, time will tell. Now, on to this week's topic. For this week, I want to talk about what is competitiveness. And by that I mean, like, how competitive does an army have to be for you to enjoy playing it? Our show this week was about second-tier armies. That presupposes that there's even the existence of this sort of thing, that we can even striate them in a sensible way and sort of agree on what we mean by that, which could be argued, but for the moment, let's just ride with that assumption. I often talk to my co-host on Warren Weekly, Tom, and when I do, about lists, and I find we often end up talking past each other. Because he'll say, I can't play this army or this list or whatever, it's not competitive. And I say, sure it is. And I realized at one point that the challenge there was we each had separate definitions of what that means. And we were talking past each other for that reason. So I think competitiveness means different things to different people. For some, it means it has to have a solid chance if piloted to the best of your abilities, and if not, let's say given the short end of the stick on luck, of, topping out a tournament, taking it home. That's competitive, and that's the army they want to play. For others, and I would certainly count myself in this group, competitive means I show up to the game and I am competitive. I can generally give a good game. Even if I'm going to lose 6 or 7 out of 10 games, I can still make it a good game, right? It's not automatic. The difference between 60 or 70% and 100% is a big difference. That's a lot. That means you win 3 or 4 out of 10, right? And, if you play smart, if you play well, if you outplay your opponent, if there is a delta, if dice break your way just a little, or if the scenario is slightly favorable, or if the terrain is slightly favorable, or if the realm is slightly favorable, or the other 100 ephemeral things you don't control that are outside of list building or army selection are even remotely in your favor, then maybe you can tip the percentages the other way. So for me, it just has to be an army that, like, I think my line is it has to be an army that I put on the table and I feel like I can show up and have a game. Now, the bright side of that in AOS right now is that there are very few armies that aren't like that, in my estimation. Maybe other people have different experiences, but they're certainly not mine. For the most part, almost any army you have, even the ones we talked about that were quote unquote second tier, if you sort of build a good version of that list and play well, you will be competitive by my definition that I just gave with even top tier stuff. Does that mean you win the majority of your games? No, probably not. Does that mean you're going to 5-0 a tournament and take it? No, probably not. But again, that's not my definition of competitive. And that got me thinking about how you define competitive and how you define how much competitiveness, however you even define it, then sets the bar for the army you'll play. So I thought that'd be interesting to discuss because it's fascinating to me to unpack it, because when we all have these different definitions, we can end up using the same word and still just talking past each other and not agreeing. So that's the topic this week. How do you think about competitiveness with your army that you're choosing, you're playing? Whether that be, by the way, in your garage, at your club, at your game store, or at a tournament, and how do those different settings impact how you think about that? For me, I don't think they impact it much. I think I more or less have the same bar almost anywhere. Now, that isn't to say sometimes I don't do silly games at home, where I take something that's like sort of purposefully wacky or bad or crazy just to try stuff out. I'll do that. But if I'm thinking about this as like, this is a list I would like to play more than once, right, then I think that I have the same bar here or at a tournament. And that's probably because I don't ever show up expecting to win or even do well. I show up expecting to play some fun games with models I like. But that's my version. What's yours? So drop it down in the comments, or as always, make a response video. If you do, link that back to me and I'll put it down in the description. You can always return back here and look at the description for everybody who's made those response videos. Down there you'll also find last week's topic as well as all the responses linked there. But as always, appreciate you watching this one, and we'll see you next time.